Before we jump into today's story, drop a quick comment to say hi. Tell me your name, where you're watching from, and let me know if you're sticking around till the end. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. All right, let's get into the story. I never wanted to come back to America. After my parents sent me to India for my studies, I thought I'd escaped the shadow of the place I grew up in, the small New England town of Brookhaven, Massachusetts. But life has its way of pulling you backward, dragging you like a corpse tied to a rope. Friends, you enjoy listening to stories, but you don't subscribe to the channel or like the videos. I request you to please subscribe to the channel right now so that I get more motivation to bring you even more stories. If you help me reach 1,000 subscribers, I promise to bring you extremely scary stories with a truly real feel. 2 horror stories every single day. So go ahead, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and now let's move on to today's story. When my father died of a sudden stroke, I was the last surviving member of the family. That left me with the burden none of my relatives wanted: the house on Widow's Hill. I should have sold it. Maybe I still will. But that house has roots in me, sharper than bone, deeper than nightmares. And the night I stepped back inside, I realized that the house had been waiting. The Uber driver dropped me a mile away, refusing to drive up the old road even though I offered extra cash. His face went pale when I gave him the address. "Man, I don't know what you're trying to do out there, but people don't go to Widow's Hill after dark. You should stay in town and check it out in the morning." It was already after 9 p.m. The autumn wind scraped along my neck, and dead leaves rattled down the cracked road as I hauled my suitcase toward the looming silhouette ahead. The house stood like a black wound against the horizon. Old Victorian, almost 3 stories if you counted the attic. Turrets like claws scratching the sky, windows like hollow eyes. Ivy had overgrown so thick it looked like veins feeding a dead thing. People in town used to whisper that the house wasn't mine. Not really. They said it belonged to her, to the widow who built it with her husband's fortune in the late 1800s. He died mysteriously the day they moved in. She lived there alone and, well, she never really left. I told myself it was bullshit, folk stories. And yet, when I touched the rusted gate, my skin burned, like static had crawled beneath it. Something whispered beyond the walls, words stretched too thin to hear. Inside smelled wrong, rotten perfume, that sick sweetness like flowers left in a closed coffin. The air was wet, though all the windows were shut. I kept telling myself it was just mildew, old house problems, but my heart pounded the way it used to when I was 10 years old, screaming under the same roof, swearing the shadows moved even when I held a flashlight steady. The floor groaned under my boots like it was remembering me. "Dad?" I whispered without meaning to. The silence that followed was too heavy, like the house was listening. I set my bag in the parlor, pulled off the thick cloth covers from the furniture, trying not to choke on dust. The old portraits still lined the walls, long dead relatives, their eyes strangely glossy, as if painted with some liquid still wet. The widow's face hung in the center, her black lace veil covering half her features. Only her mouth was visible in a pale slit. I lit a single lamp. Electric wires never worked right here, even when my father was alive. The lamp's glow looked pathetic against the vast, choking dark. I made myself some stale coffee from what was left in a tin I'd found. Then, for no reason, I said out loud, "I'm only here for a few nights, just to sort things out. That's all." The lamp flickered. Around midnight, I was still awake, sitting by the fireplace, scrolling through my phone to distract myself. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, upstairs. I froze. My rational mind leapt for excuses. Rats, wood settling, pipes. But I'd grown up here. I knew the sound of a person walking across the upstairs hall. Heel after heel, pacing. I grabbed the fireplace poker, even though my hands shook. I whispered, "Hello? Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched until the fire hissed. Then, all at once, the sound resumed, this time running, charging, straight toward the top of the staircase. I bolted toward the door before the sound ended. For a split second, I swore I saw something at the top of the stairs. A black figure in widow's lace, mouth stretched in a smile too wide for a face. Then, there was nothing.
Morning sunlight is a liar. It draped itself over the porch, made the peeling paint look almost quaint, almost normal. My rational brain clung to that. I told myself I'd been overtired, maybe hallucinating. But the footprints in the dust upstairs weren't mine. Bare feet, thin, long, almost skeletal. I wanted to leave. God knows I did. But I had papers to arrange, inheritance nonsense to sign, and something else kept me tethered. It didn't feel like the house wanted me gone. It felt like it wanted me back. That afternoon, I went into town. The same library I had gone to as a kid stood half abandoned at the edge of Main Street. The old librarian, Mrs. Dwyer, was somehow still alive, though her hands shook like brittle paper. When I gave her my last name, her breath caught. "You went back there?" she asked, voice trembling. "Only for a few days." Her eyes shifted toward the dark window panes. "Don't stay. That house, it remembers. It feeds on the ones bound to it. Your family was never free of her curse." I felt sweat trickle down my spine. What curse? Mrs. Dwyer closed the massive register book. "The widow lost her husband the night they moved in. Some say she poisoned him. Some say he saw what lived in the house and chose death. But she didn't mourn. She celebrated. Every man in that house since then has died, one by one, and every child that returned to it." She stopped. I leaned closer. "Every child that returned what?" Her lips trembled. "Never left." That night, the house played with me. Every mirror showed a delay to my reflection, half a second too late, like someone was pretending to be me. The faucet ran dark water that stank of metal, but only when I looked away. And then, around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. I snatched it up, desperate for human contact. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Hello?" Static swelled. Then a voice.
whispered, trembling, like it came from the walls around me. "You shouldn't have come back." The line went dead. I didn't sleep the second night either. Not really. My eyes closed, sure, but the atmosphere pressed on my chest like something heavy was sitting there, watching. Every time I jerked awake, I swore I saw movement near the doorframe, like a dress hem slipping away just before I turned my head. By the time dawn crawled its way through the shutters, my body ached, my mind foggy. I wanted to pack my bags and head to Boston, get on the next plane out of Massachusetts. But when I tried to turn the front door's handle, it wouldn't move. The lock wasn't stuck. It wasn't jammed. It had changed. The brass knob was cold and smooth, as if it had never been meant to open from the inside. I tried every door, every window, wrenched, shoved, cursed until my throat went raw. Nothing opened. Even the old back kitchen door, which I remembered squeaking wide when I was a kid sneaking out at night, was fused to the frame. My phone had 1 bar left of signal. I tried calling emergency services, punching 911 with frantic fingers. "This number cannot be completed as dialed," the voice on the line said, mechanical and wrong. Static hissed afterward, like breathing. I tossed the phone on the table, chest heaving. That was the moment it hit me. The house wasn't keeping me safe. It was keeping me. Afternoon sunlight barely pierced the curtains, and I forced myself to move room by room, hunting for some explanation. The upstairs hall felt wrong, bones sagging beneath the floorboards. As I walked, whispers leaked from the walls. Not in English, not in any language I knew. They ebbed and swelled like a tide, sometimes soft as humming, other times sharp enough that I spun around convinced someone was behind me. The first door I opened was a bedroom I hadn't entered in years. When I was a boy, I screamed whenever my father dragged me past it. I remembered clawing at his hands, begging not to be near that room. Now, the reek of mildew and rosewater hit me like a stale slap. The wallpaper peeled back, exposing brown veins of water stains. And in the middle of the bed was a depression, as if someone had been lying there seconds ago. The whispering grew louder. For one horrible instant, words crystallized inside the hiss. "Lie down." I staggered back, slamming the door. My chest hurt from how fast my heart raced. My father's study was unchanged. The heavy oak desk, the glass cabinet of old law books, the globe he used to spin while lecturing me about responsibilities and inheritances I didn't yet understand. But there was something new among his papers. Tucked inside a half-open desk drawer was a notebook I'd never seen before. The leather cover had cracked, and my father's handwriting scrawled jagged across the first page, far messier than I remembered. It wasn't a journal. It was warnings. The house watches. Do not look at her picture for long. Do not answer when she calls your name after midnight. The doors may lie. The phone may lie. Only daylight is real if you last to see it. Page after page of raving words. Some sentences didn't make sense. She feeds on the returning bloodline, or do not sleep in the master room, she will sit on the bed frame. One page had a different kind of ink, dark reddish brown, dried into a smear. The writing was shaky. "If you read this, son, I am so sorry. I tried to keep her with me, away from you, but she knows you have come back. She will not have me anymore. Only you." I dropped the notebook like it burned me. I don't remember much of the rest of that day, beyond pacing, trembling, trying to convince myself it was all the product of fatigue and grief. But by the time night fell, the house's mood shifted so violently I felt it in my teeth. No longer passive whispers, no longer silence pressing on me. Now it wanted to play. The walls creaked with slow footsteps when I sat in the parlor. When I moved, they stopped in perfect synchrony. The shadows weren't aligned with the furniture anymore. Chairs bent the wrong way. Lamps cast light where there should have been none. And then I heard my name. Not shouted, not whispered, spoken clearly at the bottom of the staircase. "Daniel." I froze. My stomach dropped with recognition. The voice was my father's. I couldn't breathe as I craned my head toward the staircase, poker tight in my grip. Every stair was swallowed in dark, but the sound came again. "Daniel, come here. It's cold down here. Help me." My father was dead. I knew that. I was at his funeral, saw the coffin lowered, and yet hearing his voice pleading was worse than the widow's whispers, because part of me wanted to obey. Somehow, my feet carried me not downstairs, but upward, toward the attic ladder. It unfolded as if waiting for me. I had never dared to enter the attic as a child. My father forbade it, claiming it was unstable, unsafe. The air grew so cold, my breath smoked in front of me. When I pulled the chain and the single bulb flickered on, my jaw clenched until my teeth ached. There were dolls everywhere. Hundreds of porcelain dolls arranged in lines across the dusty boards, their glass eyes fixed forward, unblinking. Some were cracked, others armless, yet they all faced the same spot, a rocking chair at the far end. And in the chair, something sat. At first glance, I thought it was a mannequin dressed in black veil and lace, the widow herself displayed like a relic. But as the bulb swayed overhead, its body shifted ever so slightly. The veil tilted toward me. The mouth beneath it widened. The bulb popped, plunging me into absolute dark. The sound that came next wasn't human. A screech scraped the beams, and hands scuttled across the floor at an impossible speed. I ran, blind, down the ladder, into the hall, slamming doors behind me. But the banging followed, closer each time, like fists against the wood. On instinct, I dived into my father's study, shoved the heavy desk against the door, shaking uncontrollably. The banging stopped. The silence pressed, thicker than any sound. Then, softly, so soft I thought I imagined it, the widow's voice seeped through the keyhole. "You'll never leave, Daniel. You are mine now." I don't remember much sleep that night, just the sound of my own pulse, echoing in my ears like a drum. The desk barricade stayed in place until morning,
but I was too afraid to move it. I sat there shivering for hours, clutching the fireplace poker until my knuckles turned white. When sunlight finally forced its way through the shutters, the air in the room lightened. Not much, but enough for me to breathe again. I pushed the desk aside. The door swung open easily, as if nothing had been pounding on it at all. But on the outside of the door, scratched deep into the wood, were 5 words written in jagged lines. "You can't outlast me." My blood went cold. By mid-afternoon, I realized something unsettling. The house that locked me in, the one that sealed its windows and doors, had left one door unlocked. The basement door. It had always been bolted shut when I was younger. My father never let me near it. The few times I'd asked, he changed the subject, his voice tight. Now, the bolt was gone. The wooden door stood ajar by 2 inches, just enough to breathe out the stench of wet earth and rusted metal. As the draft slithered under my skin, I felt it. The house wanted me to go down there. And the worst part? I almost obeyed.
That evening, I sat at the parlor table, notebook open, desperately writing down everything that had happened. I needed something to keep me grounded. But the house had other plans. The crackling started faint, like the noise of an old record spinning. Then words formed, as if woven from the walls themselves. "Daniel," it whispered. I froze. The voice wasn't my father's this time, and it wasn't the widow's rasp. It was my mother's. She had died 15 years ago, far from this cursed place, peacefully in her sleep, they told me. But now her voice stretched through the walls, tender at first, almost soothing. "It's okay, my son. Come to me. Just come downstairs into the dark. I'm waiting." I pressed my hands over my ears until my skull throbbed, but the voice slipped through bone like it lived inside me. "Don't fight me. I've missed you." Then the smell hit. Her perfume. Lavender and citrus. The same she wore when she tucked me in as a child. Every rational thought split down the middle. A piece of me wanted to believe, to see her again, to finally have one parent who hadn't left me. And yet I remembered my father's notebook, his one clear rule: do not answer when she calls your name after midnight. Still, when the clock struck 12, I broke. I whispered back, "Mom?" The house sighed, long and triumphant. The floorboards above me creaked as if someone had begun to walk slowly across them, heading toward the parlor. Chair legs scraped. A knock, soft and deliberate, tapped on the ceiling above my head. Then footsteps on the stairs. I gripped the poker again, sweat dripping into my eyes. Each step groaned in rhythm. Closer, closer. Finally, a figure appeared in the parlor doorway. For a moment, my heart nearly exploded. It was her, my mother. Not in widow's lace, not in shadow, but in the clothes I remembered. Pale blue sweater, hair tied back, eyes wet with kindness. "Daniel," she said softly, exactly as I remembered. "Don't be afraid. I'm here now." My whole body shook. "I can't be," I whispered. She smiled gently. "You've been so lonely. But we can be together again. Just come downstairs with me." And then I saw it. Her feet didn't touch the ground. They hovered inches above the floorboards. Her reflection in the window was wrong. Where her face should have been, the black veil of the widow stared back at me. The smile stretched into something else, wide, cracked, splitting across her cheeks until it wasn't my mother at all. It was the mouth I'd glimpsed on the stairs days earlier. The widow had worn her skin like a mask. I screamed without meaning to and hurled the poker. It passed through her form, slamming against the wall, but the air rippled like pitch-black water. The figure lunged, arms trembling toward me, fingers claw-like now. I grabbed the lamp off the table and swung it hard. The bulb burst into sparks, and for a moment the electricity flared, so bright the figure shrieked, dissolving into shadow. The scream tore through the air, rattled glass, made every bone in my skull vibrate. It didn't sound human at all, more like hundreds of voices layered over each other. Then, silence. The widow was gone. I staggered, gasping, chest on fire. I wanted out more than anything. But the silence of the house was worse now. Not relief, anticipation. Like it knew I'd seen her clearly, that I couldn't deny her existence anymore. And as I stood shaking, the door to the basement slowly, silently, creaked open wider. The smell of earth and rot churned up like a wave. I swear I heard movement down there. Wet dragging like something too large to crawl upright was pulling itself slowly toward the stairs. And faintly, barely audible beneath the sound, was my father's voice again. Weak, pained, pleading. "Help me, son. I'm down here. Please help me." I collapsed to my knees, tears burning. Because despite everything I'd read, everything I knew, a part of me still wanted to believe him. I told myself I wouldn't go into the basement. I told myself 100 times, pacing the parlor floor until I nearly wore a groove. My father's notebook was clear. Nothing good lived down there. But the house had other plans. The whispers pressed against my skull, growing sharper as the night deepened. Sometimes they took my father's voice, sometimes my mother's, soft and pleading. And then came another voice, my own. It echoed from the basement like a mockery, my cadence, my tone, calling out into the silence, "Daniel, come down. I need you." Hearing myself speak from the dark nearly drove me insane.
I lasted until 3 a.m. before breaking, the poker still in my hand, flashlight clutched. I pulled the basement door open. The wooden steps creaked as if screaming at me not to put weight on them, but something deeper pulled me downward. The air grew dense, suffocating. The smell of mold and iron filled my nostrils. Every step felt like walking into another world. When my foot touched the dirt floor, the door behind me slammed shut with such force dust rained down from the beams. The flashlight beam shivered over old coal bins, rusted shelves, and stone walls that looked older than the house itself. But then I realized something terrifying. The basement was much bigger than it should have been. The foundation stretched out into a long tunnel, yawning dark, vanishing deeper than any cellar ought to go. Against every instinct screaming inside me, I walked. Every few feet, the beam caught objects left in the dirt. Shoes, cracked eyeglasses, yellowed scraps of fabric. Then bones. Small bones. Dozens scattered across the earth like teeth spit out by the ground itself. My chest heaved, but still I walked on. The whispers returned, filling the tunnel, circling me.
My father's voice this time, urgent, breaking. "Daniel, please, come faster. Don't let her take me. Please, son." The dirt beneath my boots grew softer, wetter. Buried impressions of hands pressed upward from the soil, stretching, clawing toward the surface. That's when I saw her. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, its ceiling dripping with black roots. In the center was a pit of earth sunk deep into the floor, circled by candles that burned, though no flame touched them. And crouched beside the pit was a figure. At first I thought it was my father. His suit, his familiar bent shoulders, his voice crying, "Help me." But when he turned toward me, his face was wrong. His eyes had been hollowed out, and his mouth hung open wider than any human jaw could stretch. His voice spilled from somewhere else, far above me, far below me, as though his body was just a puppet. The widow rose behind him. Her veil brushed the ground, her dress soaking with soil. But she was taller than before, impossibly tall, her head nearly scraping the chamber roof. And from her chest, from beneath the lace, hands pressed outward, as though dozens of trapped bodies writhed beneath her skin. She didn't screech this time. She sang. Not words I could understand, but long drawn-out notes like a lullaby hummed through a throat filled with mud. The sound vibrated through my bones, made my insides twist. I wanted to collapse and weep. My flashlight flickered. The widow lowered her veil, and for the first time, I saw her entire face. It wasn't one face, it was many, shifting, overlapping, the outline of my mother's smile, my father's grimace, my own mouth opening in silence, all of them pressed beneath her translucent flesh, straining constantly to break free. The sight nearly broke me. "Come," she whispered. But her lips didn't move. The whisper was inside me like a command my body obeyed before my mind. My feet took steps forward toward the pit. My grip slackened on the poker. My thoughts slowed to syrup. All I could hear was her song. All I could see was her shifting faces. And then, just as my toes reached the rim of the pit, I snapped back. The glint of something caught my eye, my father's notebook, lying in the dirt near the pit as though dropped in his last struggle. A page was opened, words etched in jagged red. "If you see her, break the circle." The candles. They weren't just for show. They trapped whatever nightmare had clawed its way into this house. I don't know how I found the strength, but I lunged, knocking one of the candles into the dirt. Its unnatural flame sputtered and died. The chamber shook. The widow screamed then, not as a song, but as a sound like every grieving throat in history crying at once. The walls splintered, roots tore open, and soil rained down. Her tall shadow warped, twisting violently as hands stretched from her form toward me. I grabbed the notebook and ran. The tunnel groaned as though alive. Doors that hadn't been there before appeared in the dirt walls, dozens of them, all wooden, all rattling, hands pounding from the other side. The widow's shriek followed behind me, shaking dust from the ceiling. She was coming. I stormed up the basement stairs, lungs on fire, vision blurring.
The door at the top flung wide when I hit it, and I collapsed into the kitchen, choking, clutching the notebook to my chest. For now, I was out, but not safe, never safe, because I could still hear her. Even with the basement sealed, her song threaded upward, through the floorboards, seeping into the walls, into my bones. "You are mine, Daniel. You have always been mine." I should have left then. I should have broken a window with the poker or set the whole house ablaze. But the truth was clear. No matter what I did, the house wouldn't let me go. The basement was sealed once more, but her voice threaded through the walls, pulsing like blood in veins. The widow wasn't just in one room anymore. She was everywhere. When I touched the wallpaper, I felt a faint heartbeat. By late afternoon, the house started to change. The parlor where I sat warped without warning, furniture rearranging when I glanced away, portraits slipping off the walls and rehanging at crooked angles. Every photograph showed her now. The same black veil, the same cracked mouth always lurking behind my family's faces. Sometimes her pale hand rested on my father's shoulder, sometimes her head tilted above my mother's, and in one she held me as a baby. I tore it down, but when I turned, the same image stared back at me from the mantel. This house wasn't haunted. The house was her. I dug further into my father's notebook, desperate. His handwriting deteriorated with each page, scrolled like someone shaking in terror. Several fragments stood out. She roots into the wood. Don't burn it. It feeds her. She wears their faces to weaken me, to make me obey. The circle below keeps her tethered. Break it, and she hunts. Keep it, and you rot with her. He had no solution, no escape written down. My hands trembled over the final line, written so faint I almost missed it. If I cannot leave, maybe he can. Maybe my son will outlast her. But I was here, and I was already failing. The third night came fast, shadows smothering the house like ink spilled across paper. The whispers rose into screams, the floorboards bulged as though something crawled beneath them. Doors slammed on their own, rattling until hinges gave. From the upstairs hall came the sound of children laughing. Dozens of voices, shrill and sharp, looping endlessly. I forced myself not to go look. I knew what I'd find. Instead, I retreated into the kitchen with the notebook and the last working lamp. But even there, the widow found me. The refrigerator door swung open, though it had been empty since I arrived. Inside, not food, not shelves, just her face pressed to the gap, veil dripping with soil. Her lips formed words I didn't want to hear. "You belong to me already. Stop resisting." I slammed it shut and nearly vomited. I don't know why I did it. Maybe madness, maybe exhaustion, but I broke my father's rule. I entered the master bedroom. The bed frame still stood, covered with rotten sheets that looked damp with age. Every mirror had been shattered, the glass swept into the corners as though someone hadn't wanted to look at themselves anymore. I stood there trembling, and that's when the whisper came. "Lie down." The same command I'd heard days earlier. Something inside me almost obeyed. My muscles turned heavy, like invisible hands guided me toward the bed. I shoved myself against the doorway, panting, shaking violently. With everything I had, I staggered backward into the hall. The bed groaned behind me. Something unseen shifted upon it. At 3 a.m., the house's restraint snapped. The walls stretched, plaster cracked like dried skin tearing apart. The ceiling bulged inward and dripped a black sap that steamed on contact. The
The structure moaned like a living thing, beams snapping in agony. I bolted for the parlor as every door swung wide. Figures poured from them, not whole, not alive, but silhouettes of my family. My father's hollow face, my mother's broken smile, cousins, grandparents, people long dead. They staggered toward me, eyes blank, mouths open in unison. "Stay forever!" I shoved through them, but their bodies weren't solid. They folded like paper, wrapping around me, clinging like wet cloth. "Stay forever!" Their voices blended into the widow's shriek. I ran into the hallway where the old grandfather clock stood. The pendulum swayed, louder than it ever had, striking against the case like a hammer. Its face had changed. No numbers, only one phrase scrolled in red. "Time is hers." And the pendulum split open with each swing. Inside wasn't brass or gears. Inside was an eye. It rolled, wet and massive, bloodshot veins pulsing outward until cracks streaked across the case. That eye fixed on me, and the widow's voice shrieked out from its depth. "You cannot leave. You are me."
My head spun. I couldn't fight something like this. I couldn't fight a house. But as I collapsed against the wall, my father's notebook slid from my hand, falling open to the page about the circle. "Break it, and she hunts. Keep it, and you rot with her." There was no survival either way. But maybe, a thought clawed at me. Maybe if she was untethered, there'd be a chance to destroy her. Not survive. Destroy. The idea took root, poisonous but inevitable. That meant going back to the basement. I staggered through the screaming house as walls bulged and hands pressed out of the wallpaper. The basement door gaped open like a mouth. I gripped the poker until it dug into my palm and forced myself down into the dark again. The tunnel waited. This time, it didn't hide itself. It opened wider, torchlight burning without flame, shadows cavorting on their own. The pit pulsed at the far end, breathing in and out. The widow stood beside it, waiting. But she wasn't tall anymore, or veiled. She wore my mother's form, complete and full, arms outstretched in welcome. "Daniel, don't do this. Come with me. Be safe. Be loved." Her voice nearly broke me. My knees buckled. Tears streamed down my cheeks. But I gritted my teeth, choked out a sob, and hurled the poker into the circle, scattering 2 candles at once. The circle snapped. The widow screamed. Her shape no longer held to a single form. It pulsed outward, a storm of veils, writhing limbs and overlapping faces, each flickering like a slideshow of grief. My mother's smile bled into my father's sunken eyes, which stretched into hollowed mouths of strangers I didn't know. Beneath her gown, shadows poured onto the floor, crawling up the walls, forming hands that reached toward me. "You let me out," she crooned, voice reverberating from every corner of the chamber. "You are mine now, forever." The ground beneath me split open, and black water seeped through the cracks, reeking of death. I staggered back, clutching my father's notebook as though the leather binding could protect me, though deep down I knew it didn't hold answers, only warnings. Bodies rose from the dirt. Not skeletons, not fully human either, something in between. Gray-skinned figures pulled themselves free from the soil, eyes black, mouths slack, Some wore the remnants of clothing, a bonnet, a coat, a soldier's uniform from a forgotten war. Victims, those who came before me. They reached out, whispering with lips full of earth. "Stay with us. It is easier. Stop fighting. Stop fighting." They didn't lunge. They circled me like mourners at a graveside, closing in slowly, dragging their feet in unison with the widow's song. I bolted toward the stairs, notebook in one hand, flashlight in the other. But the house wouldn't let me escape. The staircase twisted, bending in on itself like a rib cage. Steps decayed into mush beneath my boots. By the time I stumbled back into the kitchen above, I realized I wasn't in the kitchen at all. I stood in the master bedroom. The bedsheets writhed, bulging with something moving beneath them. The wardrobe dripped water. The walls pulsed like lungs, expanding and deflating with every breath. This wasn't a house anymore. It was her body. I had nowhere left to run, so I turned to the notebook again, flipping past blood smears and frantic ink. Near the back, half-buried in illegible lines, I found something new. The house can't be destroyed. She is older than it, deeper than it, but she is tied to blood. If she feeds on us, she endures. If we deny her blood, she starves. The only way to end it, someone of the bloodline must end himself inside. Deny her the cycle. Deny her the air. My hand shook so hard, I barely kept hold of the book. He had considered it, ending his own life in her stomach, in her house, so there'd be no son to inherit, no bloodline to return. But he didn't do it. He left it for me. The widow appeared in the center of the room, as if the walls birthed her. Her body filled the doorway, towering, hunched, weaving with hundreds of faces. My father's among them, mouth wrenched open in silent apology. Her voice hit me in layers, kind, cruel, desperate, soothing all at once. "Stop running, Daniel. Lay down, rest. You will not suffer any more once you give yourself to me. Be like all who came before." The bed behind me groaned as unseen weight pressed into it. The sheets rustled. A dent appeared, the shape of a body waiting for me.
My body shook violently, torn between giving up and swinging again. I ripped the lamp from the nightstand, wrenching the cord from the wall, and held it up in shaking hands. Her faces turned toward me, hundreds of eyes narrowing. "You cannot fight me with light," she hissed. But when I smashed the lamp at her feet, sparks flared bright. For a second, the figures beneath her skin screamed, writhing, pressing outward against her veil. For a second, she was vulnerable. I dove forward, jabbing the broken glass into the pulsing black skin beneath her veil. A spray of something hot and unnatural sizzled across my arms as she shrieked, recoiling. The figures swirled violently, her form cracking like shattered porcelain. But instead of dying, she split. 2. Then 4. Then dozens of widow figures poured outward, surrounding me from every corner of the room. They closed in, duplicating endlessly, whispering in harmony. "You are us, always were, always will be. Your blood built this house. Your breath warms it. You cannot leave. You are the house." A horrible realization struck me. I wasn't just trapped. I was being transformed.
The longer I stayed here, the more of me she consumed. If I gave in, maybe I wouldn't even die. Maybe I'd become just another face beneath her veil, screaming silently for eternity. That was her promise when she said, "Forever." The widow figures advanced as I stumbled against the wall, cornered. The notebook slipped from my trembling hands, landing open on one final empty page. But as I stared at it, words began to form in fresh ink, as if written by invisible fingers. Daniel, if you are reading this, you still have one choice. Make it yours, not hers. It was his voice, my father's. Not stolen, not corrupted, his. And with that, the widow shrieked like a banshee, lunging toward me with all of her forms at once. The widow's forms closed around me, dozens of her faces flickering in and out of reality. Mouths cracked wider than human jaws, hands multiplying until the air was thick with them. Every breath I took was stolen, pulled from my lungs by the house itself. But the notebook's last words blazed in my mind. You still have one choice. Make it yours, not hers. The choice. My father hadn't made his, but I could. The walls pressed inward, furniture bending as though melting toward me. The ceiling sagged, dripping tar that hissed where it touched my skin. The widow's chorus hissed in unison. Lie down, give yourself, be one of us. The dent in the bed deepened, sheets writhed as unseen hands smoothed them out, beckoning. I pressed my back against the wall, clutching a broken shard of the lamp glass. Useless, I knew it, but it was all I had. Then the floorboards cracked, roots burst upward from the wood, wrapping my ankles, tugging me toward the bed. As her forms closed in, my father's hollow face appeared again beneath her veil. His expression wasn't monstrous this time, not distorted, not muffled. It looked tired, regretful. His lips formed words silently. End it. I knew then what he meant. This wasn't about survival. It was about starvation, denying her what she needed, the bloodline, the air, me. That was the only way to break the circle, not free her. I had to end myself inside the house. But in that moment, survival screamed louder. I wasn't ready. I wasn't willing. Roots dragged at my legs, cutting skin as they pulled me toward the waiting sheets. My body flailed, instinct raging against sacrifice. I hurled the broken glass, tearing through a shifting face. She shrieked, splitting into smoke, but reformed instantly with another visage. The walls warped and split, and I realized the house wasn't even trying to scare me anymore. It was finishing the ritual. Every door, every hallway, every photograph, it had all led here. Either I gave in to her, or I chose to deny her. Through the chaos, through the shrieking and shifting faces, I remembered something. I was 10 years old, hiding under the covers as my father sat on the edge of the bed. He whispered to me in a rare moment of honesty, one I'd long forgotten. Daniel, you're stronger than me. One day, you have to be. That memory snapped like a cord in my chest. I knew what I had to do. The widow loomed over me, her veils dripping, her arms endless. Every mouth screamed, "Forever, forever, forever." I clawed at the roots pinning me, dragged my bleeding body toward the parlor fireplace where the iron fire poker still lay. She seemed almost gleeful, narrowing all of her faces on me, whispering,
Yes, take it. Give me your blood. Lay down and end inside me. But I wasn't going to lie in her bed. I wasn't going to be another silent face under her veil. I gripped the poker, turned it against my own skin, and pressed the point hard against skin. Her voices faltered at once.
"No," she whispered, 100 mouths wavering. "Not like this. You give yourself to me. To me." Her tone cracked into desperation. "Be my son. Be mine." I met the dozens of eyes flashing through her veil and spat blood at the floor. "I'd rather end than be yours." And I drove the iron into myself. The world imploded. Her scream tore through the walls, splitting beams, shattering glass, collapsing portraits. Her veil burned away in writhing fire as dozens of faces turned to ash, screaming in agony. The house buckled inward, groaning, every room folding into itself, as though the world was trying to erase it. My veins froze, my chest tore itself apart on the poker, breath leaving me in ragged bursts. But over the pain, I felt her weakening. The widow's voice faltered, cracked, the chorus of whispers dissolving into silence one by one. "You cannot deny me." And then, nothing but quiet. I don't know how much time passed, maybe minutes, maybe hours. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on cold grass. The house was gone. No splintered wood, no foundation. Nothing but a bare patch of earth on Widow's Hill, the trees swaying gently in the night air. The poker was still in my chest, but the pain had dulled into nothing, like the nerves had already gone dark. Above me, stars scattered across the New England sky. The wind smelled clean for the first time in days. And then, I saw them. My parents. Not distorted, not veiled. My father stood tall in his suit, my mother radiant beside him. They looked down at me, eyes full of sorrow, but also relief. She whispered, "Rest now, Daniel. You did what we could not." I managed a weak smile. Then the darkness took me. Darkness swallowed everything after I drove the poker into my chest. I thought that was the end, a final act of defiance, a choice that was mine and not hers. But death didn't feel like I expected. It wasn't silence. It wasn't peace. It was falling. I drifted through something that wasn't dream and wasn't death. An endless midnight void filled with faint whispers overlapping each other. Faces flickered all around me, luminous as pale moons. My father's, my mother's, strangers I had never known but felt rooted to through blood and time. They all whispered the same phrase. "She is not gone." I tried to scream, but my throat was gone. My body was gone. I was thought only, regret floating in emptiness. The darkness thickened, and slowly, inevitably, I felt gravity pull me back. I jolted awake with a gasp. My chest seared like fire. My shirt was soaked in blood, though the poker was gone. I was lying not on Widow's Hill, not on grass, but on a hospital bed. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The sterile air of antiseptic burned my nose. Machines beeped weakly nearby, wires snaking into my veins. Doctors said I had been found at the edge of town, collapsed on the roadside. A passerby had called for help.
The police wanted to know what happened up at Widow's Hill, but when I asked them what they saw there, they only shook their heads. "There's nothing up there," the officer told me firmly. "Just dirt. Always has been." For weeks, I tried to convince myself that I hallucinated, that trauma and grief played tricks on my mind, that maybe the blood loss warped everything into nightmares. But the scars on my chest burned every time I ignored the truth. And at night, when fluorescent hospital lamps flickered and no one was near, I started to hear her again. Not loud, not monstrous, not yet, just faint. My mother's voice. "Daniel, come home."
Mirrors betrayed me first. Sometimes my reflection didn't blink when I did. Sometimes a faint black veil flickered across my shoulders. Then walls, ordinary plaster, would ripple as though something shifted behind them. At night, I saw her lace veil draped across my ceiling fan, swaying though no window was open. The widow wasn't tied only to the house. She was tied to me. Breaking the ritual hadn't destroyed her. It had anchored her inside the last living bloodline. Inside me. One night, I awoke to the sound of weeping. Not in the room, in my head. I staggered to the bathroom, flicked on the harsh light, and braced the sink as my own reflection began to ripple. My father's face looked back at me. Not in memory, not in delusion. His features pressed outward through my skin, eyes wide, mouth gasping. He whispered, not aloud, but inside me, "She's still here. She always was. You never freed us." And then his face dissolved, replaced by dozens of others, shifting over one another like a veil. When I finally screamed, my voice wasn't singular. It was layered with every ancestor before me. I now understand the truth. The Widow Hill's house was never the prison. It was the vessel, a shell she used, rooted into the blood and bones of those who lived within. When I destroyed the circle, I freed her, not outward into the world, but inward into me. There will be no escaping her this time. I hear her all the time now, humming lullabies when I try to sleep, whispering when I stare too long into windows, laughing whenever I touch the scar in my chest. She doesn't need the house anymore. She has one. My body. People in town still whisper about Widow Hill. They say the land is cursed, that nothing will grow on its patch of barren dirt. They say on certain nights you can hear singing across the fields, though no one dares wander close enough to check. They don't know I walk among them now. Every day it's harder to tell where Daniel ends and the widow begins. Sometimes my hands twitch without command. Sometimes my eyes linger too long on strangers, imagining their faces beneath my skin. Sometimes I smile, but it isn't mine. So I write this last entry, though I no longer know why. Maybe to warn someone. Maybe to remind myself that I ever was Daniel. If anyone ever reads this, know this. The house on Widow Hill is gone, but I am still here, and the widow is waiting inside me.